Welcome to another episode of the Pathfinder Report. My name is Ethan Harper, and I'll be running point as your host today. In the studio with me today is Mr. Joel Gruey, and our special guest today, Mr. Chaz Toplikar. Today, we're going to be talking about the conflict in Iran and what that means for us here in the U.S. However, I'd like to give a brief introduction to our special guest first, since he's never been on the report before, though he's had a hand in getting it started. He is a board member. Mr. Chaz Toplikar serves on the Pathfinder board of directors, and he is a captain, or excuse me, you were a captain in the active duty infantry, and for the past 3 years, you have served as a instructor in the Army Reserves. Make sure I got that correct. Okay, cool. Got that correct. He's also just a nerd, huge nerd, and a blast to have around. Joel and I have known Chaz for quite a while, and I think it's actually safer to say that the two of you have known me longer than I've known you.
That's fair.
Because when I came to camp, Chaz was you were a counselor, if I remember correctly, and you were much more baby-faced back then, and not yet married, if I remember accurately.
Correct.
So, this group right here has known each other for quite a while. We're very excited to all be here in the studio together today, albeit remotely. And Chaz, it's so good to have you here, dude. Welcome aboard.
No, thanks for having me. Good grief, Joel. How long have we actually known each other? Since 2012?
Well, back up when you went to college by 4 years, somewhere around your freshman or sophomore year of high school, I think. So
yeah, I think it would have been 2012. 2012.
Yeah. So we are.
Wow.
Next year will be 15 years. It's
awesome.
It's been a thing. So yeah.
Cool. No, but thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be a part of this. Like Ethan said, excited to nerd out a little bit. So let's see if we can't get into some of the details and talk about these issues.
Yeah. Just a quick thing for the record, just for those of you that are new to this. Chaz obviously has a fair bit of military background, which we're going to hopefully leverage a bit of today. But my hope is that if I can talk him into it, he'll be a recurring guest as kind of one of our foreign policy, national security guys here. So for those of you that are new to meeting him, I hope you enjoy this show, and you'll probably get to hear some more of it. If you don't like it, don't email me. But anyway, that's fine.
I think if you don't like it, it's Ethan's fault.
Yeah, probably.
All right. So today is everything Iran. Ethan, let's get to it.
Yeah. So here's a problem that I experienced, and thankfully I know people. I have experienced the utter downpour of information, but also lack of information. It's like a fire hose where it's a direct, very fast jet of information, and you're not sure you caught all of it. So that being said, I was asleep when the conflict popped off. Like, that was a surprise to wake up on a Saturday morning. So I think the best question to start with is, how did it start? How did this conflict start?
So this one is kind of a loaded question, right? It's
right.
It's a little bit difficult to dig into.
I do realize that,
because it's not like it came out of nowhere, right? If you think about it, conflict with Iran, the United States and Iran having beef, if you'll say it that way, goes all the way back to like 1979 and the Islamic Revolution. Before 1979, believe it or not, Iran was actually a friend of the United States and a lot of Western countries. Yeah. And then in 1979, with the Islamic Revolution, completely fell apart. And a lot of that, not only did they stop being allies with the West, they allied themselves with Russia and have continued to be allied with Russia since then. So you can kind of say that the conflict started there. You can go a little bit farther back. There's even some more information regarding some disapproval. Joel, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it was 1953. There was a coup. The U.S. and the U.K. attempted to intervene in Iran, and that kind of started the bad blood before 1979.
But really, I think 79 is your key point, at least for the current iteration of regime power conflict rivalry. I think
Right.
79 is about when it started. So we're looking at here is kind of an active, hot shooting aspect of something that has at least been a tension for about 50 years.
Right. Yeah, it's been ongoing pretty much nonstop for about 50 years. A couple other big key points is Iran has been involved in a lot of proxy conflicts that obviously the United States disapproves of. There's some conflict that has continued to occur because of that. 2002, there was the nuclear disclosure, and Iran wasn't very generous about revealing the information that was being requested, and that started some significant distrust in the nation. And the current conflict, I mean, we've been having this boil for quite a few years at this point. What was it? 2 years ago, there was a significant amount of strikes, rockets, missiles that were launched from Iran. They attacked some of our bases. We attacked some of their bases. And so it's not like this is a new thing. We targeted their nuclear facilities after they engaged in their rocket and missile strikes. And part of the conflict that's occurring now is the re-engagement of those facilities because they're attempting to reinstitute those nuclear facilities that they're not supposed to have, and that we had previously destroyed. But just to answer the question, right? How did it start? Well, it kind of didn't. The start point is in 1979, and it never really stopped.
Well, maybe the way to speak to this is that on the 20th of February, when this thing kicked off, it went from a Cold War, proxies and back and forth and high stakes diplomacy and special operations sort of activities, espionage, spycraft, into a hot war. Now it's a shooting war.
Correct. Yeah.
That's your big shift. And we saw this during the Cold War with the U.S. and the USSR, where you'd see this a lot of maneuvering and back and forth, and every once in a while it would boil over. Well, it boiled over,
right?
And there's been a bunch of back and forth in that regard. Although, I guess if I'm talking to some of my friends that work with the state of Israel, they would say this goes back to the October attack, because they would say Iran had a really strong hand in that attack with funding and basically working through their proxies. And that's something we should probably talk about, is that Iran, a lot of their combat capacity, or at least their military capacity, is done through these kind of proxy forces that are not their uniform military.
Right.
They basically, and the U.S. would consider them a state sponsor of terrorism, and with a whole bunch of different, they work with what? Hezbollah, Hamas, is it Quds? I'm probably saying that wrong. There's the Quds forces, and there's a couple other different groups that are involved in ways that they move weapons, that they move supplies, and they basically reinforce terrorist entities kind of around the world.
And they're not even discreet about it, right?
No, they're not.
Iran is the primary benefactor of Hamas.
Yes.
And they maintain an extremely close relationship with Hezbollah. Like, they send the money and funds and everything. They also have some significant links to Pakistan and other Russian allied countries that have also been known to be significant state sponsors of terrorism. So,
they're getting supplies and materials from Russia right now as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And I think some China, but that's a little more debated. It's nowhere near the relationship it is with Russia. Yeah.
No, I mean, most of those countries are still aligned. I think that's one of the things that we kind of forget, right? Is we have our people, but we forget that they also are aligned on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Russia, China, North Korea, as we saw recently, Venezuela. There are a lot of, Iran, Syria. They all have their own alliances and pacts as well, and they are sharing equipment, money, resources, information all the time. A perfect example. There's currently a Chinese spy ship right outside of the Strait of Hormuz. And all it's doing is collecting information on what we're doing and sending it directly to Iran. Russia has stated numerous times that they're taking their geointelligence satellite data. Their geointelligence satellites, and feeding direct targeting information to Iran. So I had a conversation with somebody recently that they asked like, "Oh, it just seems weird. Like we're kind of just steamrolling right now, and we're just beating up on Iran." And it's like it's more complicated than that, right? Because it's not just us fighting Iran; it's them, their allies, and in engaging with Iran, we are also sending a message to our more significant adversaries on the globe. So there is a lot of strategy that goes into this. And this conflict is my personal opinion. Reagan should have dealt with this when he had the chance. The Ayatollah Khomeini, he should have gone after him
40 years ago.
And he didn't. And I think there have been a lot of atrocities that have been committed because we didn't step in. And honestly, I think the recent massacre of the civilians by the Iranian regime was kind of how it started. To your point,
are you talking the domestic massacres? Or are you talking when like the proxy in Israel?
I mean, the domestic massacres.
The domestic, yeah.
Right. And I think that kind of pushed us over the edge in conjunction with the nuclear facilities, all the other, attacks and their proxy forces that we're still perpetually engaged with. But, we saw recently their attacks on their own civilians. And I've seen a lot of different numbers about that. I've seen numbers as high as 30,000 killed.
Yeah.
That's something we see right now in our lifetime. And that's been ongoing since 79.
Yeah.
And I think Reagan should have done something about it when he had the chance. So I
think it's probably worth noting here, and I know this isn't in the list of kind of topics we're going to chew through, but it's probably worth understanding the Iranian government has it seems at least as sophisticated a repression force, a kind of an internal security, control their own people component as their external combat capacity. They both of them are incredibly robustly developed. In fact, their internal security kind of component for Iran is, I've heard some analysts say that it's more developed than their external operation capacity. So their ability, because the thing that scares them more than us, ironically, is probably their own people. Okay, because if they go, the whole thing doesn't work, and they need them to basically be willing to bow, and that. I know that's part of the current operations goal is to basically destroy that repression capacity. And I don't know how to judge how well that's being done or not, but that's an aspect of this, because I think, at least when I heard from a congressional briefing last week, the goal is not to be there for a long time. It's to let people have basically a change of government, if possible, there that doesn't involve us having any sort of long-term commitment. I know that's aspirational, probably, at least to a degree based on our history, but that repression capacity is what keeps people domestically from being able to go, nope, we're getting a new government because this one is really bad. Now, that said, we talked a little bit about the kind of inside Iran. We talked a little bit about kind of the geopolitical stuff. We probably also need to talk a little bit about the Israel-Iran conflict, because that's obviously a major part of this as well. So can we kind of get that angle here? Because there's kind of there's 3 points on this triangle that are creating part of this mess.
Yeah. I'm not going to try and sound like a broken record, right? But 1979, the Islamic Revolution, Israel and Iran and their conflict, it kind of just goes almost without saying, like, duh, there's going to be issues there. Iran is an extremely militant Islamic country, and part of that ideology that exists in their nation is the opposition to Israel, obviously for very many reasons, and part of the reason why they don't like us as well.
That we support Israel as a rule,
and they just don't like the decadence of the West. I mean, if you listen to the senior leaders' rhetoric, right, it's a constant bashing of the opulence and the hedonism of the West, right?
Yeah.
So, we kind of get I've had conversations with people about this where they said, "Oh, if we just didn't align with Israel, then maybe we wouldn't have issues." And that's just not true. It's fundamentally incorrect, because if you look at the rhetoric that's being spoken at the top of Iran's government, it's there. We are often coupled together. Yes, the U.S. and Israel. At the same time, we are mentioned separately enough and for very specific reasons that I don't think there's any way to deny it. That there is animosity to both countries individually.
Yeah.
So, Israel and Iran, there's plenty of. I mean, you could probably have a whole podcast just on this question alone, right?
Easily, yeah.
There's just a constant battle between Israel and most of the Middle Eastern countries, because they view Israel as not having a legitimate place there, because of the fact
there's a religious component to this.
Overtly. To your point, it's overt because there's no way to deny it, and there really isn't. I'm not going to say that there isn't that much more to it, but I would definitely agree with you that the religious component is the most extreme part of their aggression towards the U.S., Israel, and any of the other like European states.
Well, and it's probably worth noting, because if people aren't familiar with it, there is an overtly religious aspect to the government of Iran.
Correct.
And that's very different than our government here. So if you're not familiar with that, understand that religious motivation has a controlling aspect to the geopolitics, the policy, the domestic security, and their military and their terrorism relations within Iran. Now, that said, there are plenty of other countries that have issues with their neighbors existing or not. But Iran kind of takes it a step further because they have been pursuing nuclear weapons for quite some time. And I think you mentioned the disclosure in 2002 where it's like, actually, yes, they are in fact trying to build these things. And they're getting really close. I think the argument was that the last round of attacks was basically they were weeks away. Now, I don't know. I haven't looked at the actual information on that. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. But we do know it's been a goal for decades. Why is Iran trying to get nukes? Like, I mean, most countries in the world don't have them. I mean, there's a pretty small list of countries that actually do. Several of them are pretty big, but there's actually a fairly small number of actual countries that do. Why is it so important to Iran?
So one, it's mostly in order to flex power in their region. Right. There's always the sneaking suspicion that Israel does have nukes.
Right.
And I think Iran, right. I think Iran drives off of that. I think they feel that if they are going to have greater ambitions, which they do in the Middle East and beyond, they would have to be able to contend with Israel. Also, if their assumption about Israel having nukes is correct, and their goal is ultimately to wipe Israel from the face of the earth, you would have to have that kind of a weapon in order to be able to do that. But I think there's also another key factor here that kind of gets overlooked, because it's easy to just say, oh, they just want the weapon because obviously the Middle East and Israel and greater ambitions. But we've got to kind of go back a little bit to that alliance that we talked about, right? You've got Russia, China, North Korea, Venezuela, Iran, Syria. There is a coalition that exists, and there is an intent for most of those nations to try and become a viable partner, a viable military ally for some of the greater countries. And obtaining nuclear weapons is a very easy, well, I wouldn't say easy because so that's rocket science.
Overt.
Exactly.
You're at the table with the big kids. You're no longer sitting at the little kids for Thanksgiving. You are sitting with the parents now because you have one of the big cards.
You have one of the big sticks so that you can speak softly.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I think that's something that we kind of miss, is that they are all vying for power in their own coalition, right? We don't have that much of an issue because militancy is not one of our driving factors. Like, obviously, we are good at war. Americans have always been good at war. We're kind of a violent people. And also our military industry is second to none. And technologically, that no one can contend. Most of our allies actually, I would go so far as to say all of our allies pivot their entire strategy off of what is the United States doing and how can we couple onto that. Right. So if you look at our mindset, and a good way to look at your opposition is, if I was in those shoes, what would I do? Right. Mm-hmm. If you look at our position with our allies, with our military and the industry that we have pushing behind it, I would try and be the biggest dog on the block. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you can look at Iran and think that that's not what they're trying to do.
All right. So that brings me to kind of an important thing we haven't really covered yet. A major part of this conflict is starting to focus on this small piece of water called the Strait of Hormuz. And which people, initially people are like, how do you spell that? I can't look it up in Google because I don't even know how to put it in. But there's another aspect to Iran's position in the Middle East and its position on the world stage. One of them is nukes. The other one is black gold, right? Iran produces oil. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't refine a ton of it, but it definitely produces a lot of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Which means that oil requires transport to be viable. Now, the U.S. actually generally produces enough oil for its own demands, but that is not true around most of the world. And you were mentioning that alliance. I think the only other major energy exporter in that alliance is Russia. If I'm not mistaken, Iran, Venezuela, although that's had some regime adjustments of late, and Iran, Venezuela, and Russia were kind of the big energy producing entities, particularly when it comes to oil. Oil has a massive impact on the global economy. What's its connection to the Strait of Hormuz?
So for those who are like me and maybe not that great at geography, obviously the Persian Gulf only has one access point, mm-hmm. and that is the Strait of Hormuz. Ethan, flash up a picture of the Strait of Hormuz real quick. I was just about to
say that if you're watching this on YouTube, there is a map of the world and as a nice red circle around the Strait of Hormuz right now.
But to your point, Joel, right? Iran produces oil, yes, but that's not why the Strait of Hormuz is so significant. There are other nations that are in the Persian Gulf with no other exit except for the Strait of Hormuz. Some of them are very familiar because they do also produce a lot of oil. Kuwait,
Iraq,
Qatar, the UAE, mm-hmm. All of those nations need the Strait of Hormuz in order to export the oil. And to put it into context, globally, right, I think it's 20, maybe a little over 20% of the crude oil in the world is shipped out of the Strait of Hormuz every day.
Daily, yeah. It's almost 30 million or 20 million barrels goes through on average.
It's an absurd amount.
Yeah.
And the
Saudis too. We should have mentioned them. They put a lot through there as a rule as well.
Right. And it's the Persian Gulf. There's a lot of economy that utilizes that channelway for all kinds of things. And we're not just talking about oil. There's a lot of other things that are involved there. But the strategic impact of maintaining the Strait of Hormuz is global. And for those of you who drive, you've probably noticed it at the gas pump.
No kidding.
Because while we do have the ability to produce a significant amount of oil for ourselves, we do have oil in other reserves and from other allies. Mm-hmm. If 20% just disappears, mm-hmm. that's a lot.
It is.
And everyone's going to feel that.
And that affects more than just the fuel that goes in your car or the cost of an airplane flight.
Yeah.
It is also the transport costs of everything else you buy, eat, etc. That's got to be moved. And most of the time, we're not putting it on a boat with sails or putting it in a dirigible. Okay, this thing is our products move on, generally speaking, oil of some kind.
Correct.
And globally.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the impact of Iran having complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, which there is some debate about whether it is complete control or not. Mm-hmm. There is a significant the conflict that is occurring there is significant right now. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon until more engagements occur. But the global strategic impact of them maintaining the strait,
it is calculable, but it is astronomical.
Correct. Absolutely. Because
they need to keep control of the strait. That's one of their major geopolitical levers, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's also a great way to get people involved who didn't want to get involved, right? Like that's again, we talk about strategic alliances here. Suddenly, there are a lot of other countries because here I'll go off on a little bit of a sidetrack. Okay,
sure. And we need to talk about how these other countries have gotten pulled in because we haven't really covered that yet.
Well, and I'll touch on that real quick.
Great.
Iran is using, because there's one of the questions that I think you sent me that was, why is Iran attacking its neighbors?
Right.
I can't tell you exactly.
We can guess. Sure.
My theory is a very always failed battle strategy of if I beat up enough people, maybe they'll get the person who's beating me up to stop.
Yeah, that's not normally how that works.
And I really do believe that that's part of their strategy of if we cause enough damage, that the rest of the people will go crying to the United States and say, if you don't stop, they're going to destroy us. Again, to your point, never works, right? Never works.
No.
But that strategy is perfectly in line with what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, right?
Right.
If I cut off 20%,
aren't fighting them, right?
Yeah, if I cut off 20% of the oil supply of the world, then there are going to be a lot of countries that are going to go to the United States and be like, "Do you really think this is worth it?
Right?
Is this really what we should be doing right now?"
Or at least that's their calculation.
Correct.
Now, I'm hearing, at least for some of the Middle Eastern countries, they're like, actually, we'd rather you finish it off. I know the Crown Prince from Saudi Arabia has been reported as being on the phone with administration going, please complete the job. I know obviously the Israelis are already on board with that, but some of the other ones as well who were like, you know what, we were going to set this one out, but not anymore.
Yeah, most of the Gulf states have attempted. Well, they've attempted to leverage their own capabilities, and they're tentatively. I say tentatively because there is still some relational issues with us and some of those states, but they are tentatively allying with us in order to stop this conflict. But going beyond that, right? I don't think Iran is targeting the Middle Eastern countries in controlling the strait as much as they are attempting to hurt other big allies that the United States has. And I'm specifically talking about Europe. Because they haven't wanted to get involved in this conflict.
They've been trying actively to avoid it.
And I don't think they want to even now. And I think Iran is banking on potentially these allies going to the United States and saying, you can't keep this up. You need to stop. Again, not a great strategy because as we've seen in recent years, the current administration doesn't really like to listen to anybody else.
No, particularly the European leaders coming whining, telling them to please stop. That may not be the deck of cards you think you're going to play well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, again, like their initial strategy. If I punch every kid in this playground yard, maybe the bully will stop hurting me.
If you backed it up 4 years and this event had happened, maybe. But I don't think it's happening under this current administration. That's not going to play. At least it doesn't seem to right now. Now, granted, there's a calculated political risk because I think there is not a strong appetite for another U.S. adventure in the Middle East in any sort of long-term capacity, which I totally get. And I think the administration is at least reasonably aware of that.
Right.
But they're also not exactly putting troops on the ground here, although I keep hearing rumors that one of the solutions for the strait might be to take control of those islands that Iran kind of bases off of.
So there is a pretty significant strategic impact that those islands play in the strait. If we were to be able to take them, then we would be able to maintain a significant control of the strait. That is a viable potential option.
That's what I keep hearing tossed around, right? As one of the possible options. I
would push back on anyone who says there is a potential we put boots on the ground in Iran proper. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, politically, not great.
It's a mess. Yeah.
It's just ugly. We don't really have the appetite for a conflict like that right now. And, you know, I think it's going to be a while before we do, because with what happened in Afghanistan, not great, not going to be a potential one. We're still in Iraq.
Yeah,
as
but
much
not
as
like we
people
were.
don't. You're right, exactly. The other problem with putting boots on the ground in Iran is most of Iran's military complexes are subterranean. They are all underground. When I was at the 10th Mountain Division and I was training my platoon, one of the training pipelines we had to go through was to do a little bit of subterranean warfare alongside urban conflict, and it's not great. It's
There's a
awful.
statement. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And actually, there's been a lot of studies that have come out recently about soldiers engaging in combat in subterranean facilities, and it's also not great. The casualties that occur in subterranean warfare psychologically are far more exponential than anything when fought on the surface. There was an SAS team that did a raid in a subterranean facility, and when they came back, there were a lot of psychological issues that were occurring with the soldiers. The SAS, some of the best, right? He who dares wins and all that. And Great Britain did a study after they had completed their operation on the soldiers that survived. And the psychological impacts of subterranean warfare are very grim. It's almost not worth it. And that's part of the reason why the campaign that the United States has been waging has been almost entirely long-range strikes and an air bombing campaign. And, you know, if I could jump back to the first question, right? When did it start? That's kind of one of the funny things here. We have bombs that are specifically designed for Iran's compounds.
They're subterranean basic complexes, yeah.
We've named some of these bombs the name of the target that they're supposed to go after.
It's painted on the side.
So, you know, when we engage the nuclear facilities, those bombs were made for those facilities. We know exactly where we were going to drop them because that's what they were designed for, specifically.
Yeah.
So, you know, to the original point, when did it start? It's never stopped. And we've literally built industry around the potential engagement in Iran. And then the second point is, I think we're going to continue in that campaign, and I don't really foresee boots on the ground in Iran until the military capabilities of the regime have been significantly suppressed. And maybe that'll happen soon.
Maybe not. Yeah.
We don't know because, like you said, there's a lot of proxy forces. There's the external military. There's the internal military, police, really. And there's just a lot of politics that are surrounding this. So boots on the ground on the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, very possible.
That's probably where it ends, though.
I wouldn't see anything going further than that. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. But if it does occur, I honestly don't know that it would last very long because we would either have to win outright very quickly or we would
leave,
come to the conclusion that it's not worth it because the impacts would be catastrophic.
Yeah. Now, we should probably, before we completely leave the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, the islands, etc., there's one other fact that I was reading, I think, about a week ago. The Saudis were also in anticipation of a conflict involving the Strait. They've been thinking about this for a long, long, long time. And every once in a while, Iran kind of flexes. In fact, they have a bunch of mines that are out there. So now we're getting some friends that have mine removal gear to come in and start pulling naval mines out. We decommissioned our last kind of anti-mine ship because we thought that wasn't really a thing. And, oh, look, now we need to go find some. So we're going to find some, borrow some from some allies. That said, the Saudi solution was to just run a giant pipeline from Riyadh all the way down to the bottom of the country. They said it normally ran 2 million gallons of oil a day, or at least it was capable of it. When the conflict started, they ramped it up to 4, and they're pretty sure they can get it up to 8. That's about as much as it moves. Now, 8 million is not 20 million gallons, but 8 million is a good chunk of that 20 million. So there's at least steps being taken to try and alleviate that. I think Iran is very much not interested in further steps in that, because if we don't need the Strait of Hormuz, their leverage goes away in a lot of different ways. So
I think if Saudi Arabia is able to pull this off, there goes a lot of Iran's leverage, and that's a problem for them.
their economic leverage, which they need because their economy is kind of crappy right now.
Well, and it's not just economic leverage in the sense of their economy. It's again go back to the battle strategy of, this bully is beating me up. If I punch every other kid on the playground, maybe they'll get him to stop.
There's less people on the playground now. Right.
There's a distinct possibility that if there wasn't some kind of band-aid that could be put on the global implications of the Strait of Hormuz being controlled, it might hurt a lot more than people are willing to stomach for too long.
That's true. Yep.
Now, if Saudi Arabia is able to come in and say, hey, it's not 20%, but it'll make it hurt a lot less, that could be significant. And I'd be really curious to see what Iran does in response to that, because,
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is if you look at the Saudi, right now, I don't know if you've seen it, but I think there's reports out that look like basically UAV and ballistic missile intercepts over the Middle East, and they're doing it by country right now.
Yep.
Which is interesting considering how many are being thrown at the Saudis.
Yep.
Shocking no one, the targeting of the Saudis is quite a bit higher than any of the other countries that Iran is throwing weaponry at right now. And they've got a lot of targets they're after. I mean, that's not to say Kuwait's not getting a decent amount. It is. The UAE is getting some, that's for sure. But also, there's a whole lot of intercepts that are happening at this point. I think it was, anyway, like a couple days ago, I mean, the Saudis, I think, they're getting hit by 60, 70, 80 UAVs and missiles, and they're intercepting 90, 95% of them, which, I mean, back in the day, intercept rates at that level was kind of unheard of. There's definitely been prep work on the defensive side, which I think is part of the wind up to the hit on Iran, was moving or like fully engaging the air defense systems around it, because there was at least a recognition that Iran was going to basically punch back in some form, presumptively by air. The kind of the ballistic missiles and the drones, they did, and then their capacity to do that has like dropped off a cliff. There's kind of this residual capacity where they're still hitting stuff, but nowhere near at the rate. But I think it's going to be really hard to be able to like completely take it offline. What you do is you degrade the percentage capacity. But it means there's always going to be something floating around, most likely.
Well, and also, you're kind of touching on one of my personal favorite wheelhouses is air defense, because obviously it's something that my company does, but it's also something that was all really fascinating, especially being over in Afghanistan and kind of seeing it firsthand, right? To your point, 15 years ago, absolutely unheard of. You hear incoming and you get down. Nowadays, the capabilities that are out there with the Patriot defense system, THAAD, SHORAD.
What's that? I think Israel's got a laser, like a ground to intercept laser, and like I was seeing footage of it. We've got one of our alumni that's over there right now that was sending photos and footage over, and it's just like, wow. Like,
yeah, the concept of air defense has grown astronomically, just even in the past like 5-6 years, right?
Well, the Ukraine conflict pushed that to another level too.
Well, and we're also still discovering more and more of what we're capable of. I mean, it's funny, right? Because America kind of undersells its capabilities. I don't know if most people know this, but when you look at our adversaries' specifications for their technology, it always oversells it. The United States undersells generally, which is always super funny, because then when we deploy the equipment, we find out, oh, it's actually a lot better than we thought.
Works better than planned. Hey, what a thought.
We're learning and growing in ways that, significant implications on the battlefield. The Patriot missile defense system alone has incredibly high success rate over there, and those are strategically placed. So while to your point, yes, there are some missiles, rockets, drones that are still impacting over there. Generally, they're not hitting the strategic points because the strategic points are being protected by air defense capabilities. And it's really interesting to watch as it grows and develops and see the technology really become now a staple of any developed country's defense capabilities. It's insane, and it's really cool to watch how much strategic points have been able to be saved, how people's lives have been able to be saved, and how that's just going to become more and more realistic and standard for a lot of countries that are out there.
So I'd kind of like to bring it back around to the list of questions that we have here, because we're talking a lot about the missiles and the flailing that Iran is doing. Some people have called it flailing, which I particularly like that term. But the flailing that Iran has been doing, it puts everybody at risk, regardless of whether or not they're being effective. Missiles get through air defense. People get hurt regardless. It's one of those things where once bullets start flying and missiles start firing, it's a real risk to everybody in the region. So one of the questions that we sent you, Chaz, was, what are the risks to allies? And we've talked about that kind of already with the global economic impact of this. And of course, there's the physical danger of Iran's punching everybody on the playground. But we've talked about all this buildup, and it sounds like we've been building up you've said it, we've been building up for 50 years. We have weapons and policies in place for specific locations at this point, which is kind of crazy. But what about the U.S. allies that are getting involved? Like we kind of alluded to that earlier. I want to come back to that because I've heard of other countries getting involved. Obviously, the Saudis are running that pipeline, and they aren't necessarily our allies, but they are another party that's involved, and they're running a pipeline to decrease the economic impact. What are the U.S. allies that are getting involved? Who is helping? And could you potentially allude to why they might be helping? Or guess, anyways.
Or guess. Yeah. So as far as specific allies, right? Obviously, Israel is number one over there in the region.
Right.
We have some other kind of proxy allies like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE. Egypt's also involved, I think, as like a kind of a strategic partner, not necessarily as a full-blown ally, but we have operational capabilities to pass through their country. So there's a lot of people that are weighing in. And most of it is because it's in their backyard.
Yeah.
Right. And they've seen this threat for a long time. Like I said, when Iran launched their missile strikes not that long ago, before this conflict actually occurred, there was a lot of collateral damage to a lot of other countries. So they've been driving their neighbors away from them and driving them further and further towards us, and the eventual hope of the regime being suppressed and conflict being resolved. As far as the danger to them, I think the biggest danger is going to be those long range strikes. There's always a possibility that some get through, to your point. I don't think that there's much else that Iran can flex right now. I don't think they have much more capability. Cyber attacks, very real. Those proxy organizations that we talked about, Hezbollah, Hamas, and some of the other ones, also danger, but they might not be able to stay out there for very long. And if Iran continues to lose its credibility, its economic strength, and its military might, they might not stay proxy organizations for very long. So it'll
Do you
be
think they would
interesting.
try and find a new sponsor, Or are you saying they'll be shut down? I know the Israelis actively hunt them.
They would absolutely try and find somebody else who would sponsor them. They would either attempt to function independently somewhere else, or they would try and find somebody who can sponsor them, because these organizations,
they're ideologically driven. Yeah,
and you don't just disband something like that. Like,
there's no like file paperwork to close down the
Right.
the neighborhood terrorist organization. That's not how this works.
Right. And it's not like they're like, oh no, Big Brother's gone, I guess we'll lay down our arms and go about our quiet lives.
Not how it's going to
go. They will find a way. I would take this point real quick to say one other thing, though.
Yeah.
And I think this is something not just our allies need to be paying attention to. And I don't want to scare anybody. Let me caveat with that. There has been an increase in violent activity inside the United States, specifically from more extremists that are ideologically aligned with Iran.
We saw that drone incident at that airbase a couple days ago too.
There was the shooting that happened down here, actually in Austin, where I live, and that individual was clearly aligned with Iran and the theological and ideological motivations they have. So again, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but I am always an advocate of be smart and be aware that while it's happening over there on the other side of the globe, you're still an American and they still don't like you. And so
even if you're here,
yeah, threats are being identified across the country. Just be aware of what's going on around you, because it's even though the conflict's so far away, the ideologically driven individuals who agree are not always that far away. And that's something people need to be mindful of. It's really nice in the United States. We have very little to worry about generally in comparison to a lot of other countries. But that's why I always tell people to be smart, because you never know. So to your
what's our base rule? Don't be stupid. The inverse of that, please be smart. Like there's an element of that is very applicable.
Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the great things that our country affords us, is the liberty to think how we want to think, speak how we wish to speak, freedoms to bear arms, rights to publicly address the government without being, threatened. But that unfortunate side effect of that is that you can have people inside our nation that agree with things that the enemy is saying. So, continue to be smart. And if you see something, say something, which sounds really cheesy and stupid. But if you think that you're seeing something sketchy that's going to be a threat to you and the people around you, then you need to notify the authorities. So,
and we say something maybe not to the person that seems sketchy. Like find someone more responsible. Anyway, I
hate that saying so much.
I know, same. All right. That said, with our PSA for general safe public awareness being put through,
yes,
we probably should wrap this up, because we've burned through our time by a fair bit. But I guess I do want to close with kind of one question, like kind of peer into your crystal ball for a second, and what's next? Like, what should we be watching for? What the next part of this conflict looks like? What's the signal it's winding down, or that it's not? Like, what should we be paying attention? You've seen how some of this stuff moves before. You've seen kind of what are the tea leaves we're looking to read here, as far as what the next stage of this looks like. Because at this point, we've kind of done our big campaign. We went through a bunch of targets. The rate of targeting is going down because it's just less targets. What's the next step?
It's funny. You say, because you've seen this before. Actually, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think we really haven't done this kind of stuff this way. It is very new. This is kind of new territory, especially considering the significant amount of modern technology we have been implementing that we had not implemented previously. I think the next thing you need to, obviously, keep your eyes on the Strait. Whatever happens there will decide a significant amount of what occurs in Iran and in the Middle East in general. And I think that will be a very definitive point in this conflict. What happens after that? I would imagine we would continue with the campaign as it is currently ongoing. When looking at any kind of military strategy, you got to kind of figure out what the end goal is. Um, and at least from my assessment, from my very layman's perspective, it seems like the strategy here is dismantle military capabilities, destabilize the regime. I don't see it being similar to what happened in Iraq or Afghanistan. I don't think we have that intention. I think the goal is take them down a few notches, put them back a few decades, and then hopefully the
Give the people there a
will
chance.
have a chance. Exactly. Give them the opportunity to do what they were intending to do originally, and see if they can follow it through. So I think the first and foremost, watch the straight, and second, I think you just got to wait and see. Really, there's so much going on. The regime keeps changing heads like every couple days.
I think that's because they keep removing heads. Let's be honest.
There is that.
Being the leader of Iran is not exactly a win-win proposition right now. The retirement package is not great.
I'm dealing with brain frog right now, but I can't remember the name of the U.S. official who continuously picks up jobs like he's a magnet walking
Marco
through.
Rubio.
Yeah, Marco Rubio will be the next leader of Iran at this rate.
He's already got Cuba and Venezuela at this rate on deck for him. Like, the man is busy like nothing else.
He is the new Ayatollah. No, you know what's funny about their leadership, though, which is super weird? They have subterranean facilities like literally no one else in the world. But for some reason, their governing officials all gather in buildings above ground. Why? It doesn't make any sense. But
now, there's been some really interesting speculation on that.
Yeah.
It's speculation, but I know a good deal of work was done by U.S. and Israeli intelligence. And I keep hearing rumors that the Israeli intelligence has someone planted quite nicely that helped engineer some of those gatherings. Now, that's purely rumor. But if you want to get all the people in one room together, the Israelis have demonstrated a gifted capability for doing that. If not, send them a page. That works too, apparently.
I would say for this, keep an eye on the Strait of Hormuz, and then just kind of take it each step at a time, right? You can't predict any further, but definitely keep in mind the people that are over there and the conflict that is occurring right now. No conflict is without collateral damage or without injury to soldiers. So,
thankfully, our casualties thus far have been fairly low, but they have not been non-existent.
Correct, and it is unfortunate, right? Soldiers sign up to go and fight and potentially die. That is the unfortunate aspect of being in the military. I'm quite confident there isn't a single creed I said when I was in the Army that didn't very explicitly said I could die. I think all of them did. So it is an unfortunate aspect. It will probably continue to happen as this conflict goes on, and it's something we need to be realistic and reasonable with. At the same time, it's always unfortunate when people lose their lives, and so pray for the people that are over there on both sides of the conflict, because the Iranian soldiers are, in a lot of cases, just soldiers too. And a lot of them probably didn't have the choice that Americans had. We're a volunteer fighting force. Would be shocked if Iran is. So keep those people in mind. And yeah, I'd say watch the Strait for now and see what happens.
Cool. Well, that is excellent. Thank you, Chaz, so much for joining us today. It has been an honor and a blessing to have you grace our studio today. Are there any socials that we could plug for you? I don't think you have a podcast of your own yet for us to plug.
Other than being soon to be a recurring guest on this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm on the Discord. I'm somewhat tentatively on Facebook, though every passing day I would like to leave. But I'm also on LinkedIn if people want to follow me professionally and want to reach out for professional advice or any networking or anything. Cool. But as always, and Ethan, Joel, you all know this, if anybody needs anything, you can get in touch with me. And
know
I am
people,
happy
and those
to pursue
people know
this.
you. So
Yeah, exactly.
if you know somebody that knows Chaz, you therefore can know Chaz. You just have to be brave enough to,
Why do I suddenly have the feeling I have the A-Team theme song running through the back of my head? Anyway. This has been a very full hour.
Yeah.
It went by quickly.
It has.
I appreciate you guys inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to see you, Ethan, and Joel, of course.
For you guys listening at home, if this is your first time listening or hearing about Project Pathfinder, you can head to projectpathfinder.net to find out more. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course at the Project Pathfinder HQ YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Pathfinder Report wherever you're listening so that you can catch future episodes. And we hope to see you all back here next time. Check the description of the episode or video for links to Chaz and all of his stuff. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.